I was standing in the hotel lobby when I saw him, my husband, who was supposed to be in Chicago for a business conference. But he wasn't in Chicago. He was right here in Boston, holding hands with a woman I'd never seen before, while two small children ran circles around them. The way he smiled at her, the way he kissed her forehead, the way those kids called him daddy, everything about that moment told me my entire marriage was a lie. I turned around before he could see me, walked back to my car, and made a decision that would change both of our lives forever. I wasn't going to confront him. I wasn't going to cry or scream or beg for answers. I was going to become a ghost in my own marriage, silently gathering evidence while he continued living his double life, completely unaware that his perfect world was about to burn to the ground. My name is Catherine, though everyone calls me Kate. I'm 34 years old, and for the past 8 years, I've been married to a man named Marcus Reed. We met at a charity gala in Manhattan where I was working as an event coordinator. Marcus was charming, successful, and persistent in the best possible way. He was a commercial real estate developer, constantly traveling to scout properties and meet with investors. Our courtship was whirlwind and romantic. He proposed within 6 months, and we were married in a beautiful ceremony in the Hamptons exactly 1 year after we met. I thought I had found my forever person, the man who would be my partner through everything life threw at us. Marcus provided well for us. We lived in a gorgeous brownstone in Brooklyn. I drove a luxury SUV. We took vacations to Europe twice a year. From the outside, we looked like the perfect power couple. And I believed we were. I had given up my career as an event coordinator after we married because Marcus said he wanted to start a family soon and thought it would be better if I could focus on that without work stress. I agreed because I trusted him, because I wanted the same things he claimed to want. But months turned into years, and starting a family never seemed to be the right time according to Marcus. There was always another deal closing, another property to develop, another reason to wait just a little bit longer. 3 months ago, on a Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. I had driven into Boston to meet my college friend Rachel for lunch. We met at a restaurant near the waterfront, spent 2 hours catching up, and afterward, I decided to stop by Nordstrom before heading home. I was walking through the lobby of the Marriott, taking a shortcut to the parking garage when I saw him. Marcus, my husband, who was supposed to be in Chicago for a 3-day real estate conference. But there he was, not in Chicago at all. He was standing near the elevator bank with a blonde woman who looked to be in her late 20s. She was beautiful, glowing in a way that made my stomach immediately tighten. And there were 2 children with them, a boy who looked about 6 and a girl who couldn't have been more than 4. The little boy was tugging on Marcus's hand, laughing about something. The girl was being carried by the blonde woman. And Marcus was looking at all of them with an expression I had seen before, one I thought was reserved for me, pure adoration and contentment. I watched as he leaned down and kissed the top of the boy's head. I watched as he reached over and caressed the woman's cheek. I watched as the 4 of them got into the elevator together, looking exactly like what they were, a family. My hands started shaking so badly I had to grab onto a pillar to steady myself. My mind was racing, trying to create some logical explanation for what I had just witnessed. Maybe she was his sister? No, Marcus was an only child. A cousin? The intimacy was all wrong for that. A colleague with kids? The way they touched each other told a completely different story. I stood there for 20 minutes, unable to move, unable to think clearly. Then, slowly, the shock began to transform into something else: clarity. Cold, sharp, undeniable clarity about what I had just discovered. My husband had another family. I didn't go home immediately. Instead, I drove to a Starbucks and sat in my car in the parking lot, forcing myself to think strategically instead of emotionally. Every instinct screamed at me to drive back to that hotel, march upstairs, and confront Marcus in front of his secret family. But I didn't. Because confronting him would give him time to prepare, to hide evidence, to craft lies I might be stupid enough to believe. No, I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to know everything before I made any moves. I went home and acted completely normal when Marcus called that evening from Chicago. I asked about his conference, listened to him describe presentations he'd never attended, told him I missed him and couldn't wait for him to come home. Every word felt like swallowing glass, but I delivered them perfectly. When he returned 2 days later with a small gift, a snow globe from Chicago that he'd probably bought at Logan Airport, I hugged him and thanked him and told him how thoughtful he was. The entire time, I was studying him, looking for cracks in the performance, trying to understand how I had been fooled for so long. That weekend, while Marcus was in the shower, I went through his phone for the first time in our entire marriage. I had always respected his privacy, never felt the need to snoop because I trusted him completely. That trust now felt like the most naive mistake of my life. His phone was password protected, but I knew Marcus used the same 4-digit code for everything, our wedding anniversary. When the phone unlocked, I felt my hands start trembling again. I had maybe 10 minutes before he finished showering. I went straight to his messages and found exactly what I expected, a thread with someone named Sarah that made me want to vomit. The messages were intimate, domestic, exactly what you'd expect between a husband and wife. She talked about their children, Tyler and Emma. She complained about Tyler's teacher. She sent pictures of Emma's dance recital. And Marcus responded like the devoted father and husband, offering advice, sending encouragement, saying he missed them and would be home soon. Home. He called her place home. I scrolled back through months of messages, my heart breaking with each new revelation. They had been together for 7 years. The children were both his biological kids. They lived in a house in Newton, an upscale Boston suburb. Sarah believed she was his only wife, that he traveled constantly for work but always came back to her. Except Marcus didn't just travel for work. His work trips included the days he spent with me in Brooklyn, living a completely separate life, where I was the wife and Sarah was the secret. I heard the shower turn off and quickly returned his phone to exactly where I'd found it. When Marcus came out of the bathroom, I was sitting on the couch reading a book, looking completely calm despite the hurricane of emotions destroying me from the inside. The next morning, after Marcus left for work, I started my real investigation. I hired a private investigator named James Chin, a former police detective who specialized in infidelity and fraud cases. I told him everything I discovered and gave him carte blanche to find out whatever else I didn't know. What James uncovered over the next 6 weeks was staggering in its complexity and cruelty. Marcus wasn't just living a double life. He had built 2 completely separate existences, each one supported by elaborate lies and forged documents. Sarah Mitchell thought she was married to Marcus Reed, a successful real estate developer who worked primarily in New York and traveled extensively. She had a marriage certificate that looked completely legitimate. She filed joint tax returns. Their children had Marcus's name on their birth certificates. By every legal and practical measure, she was his wife. Except she wasn't. Because legally, I was his wife. Marcus and I had married first, and he had never divorced me. Which meant his marriage to Sarah was bigamy, a criminal offense that could send him to prison. But it got worse. Marcus had been systematically stealing from me for years. Our joint bank accounts, which I rarely checked because I trusted him to manage our finances, had been slowly drained through small transfers that never triggered my attention. He had taken out credit cards in my name, running up balances I didn't know existed. He had refinanced our Brooklyn brownstone without my knowledge using forged documents, extracting equity that had disappeared into accounts I couldn't trace. In total, James estimated Marcus had stolen approximately $470,000 from me over the course of our marriage. Money that had funded his life with Sarah and their children, paying for their house, their cars, their lifestyle while I remained oblivious. Sarah wasn't faring much better. She came from a wealthy family, and Marcus had convinced her to make him a co-owner of several properties she had inherited. He had access to her trust fund. He was slowly liquidating her assets through methods similar to what he'd done to me. We were both victims of the same predator. The only difference was that Sarah didn't know it yet. 8 weeks after I first saw Marcus at that hotel, I sat in James Chen's office reviewing his final report. Every piece of evidence was there: photographs, financial records, forged documents, a complete timeline of Marcus's movements showing how he split his time between two families. "You have everything you need for a criminal case," James said, sliding the folder across his desk. "Bigamy, fraud, forgery, identity theft. This man is looking at serious prison time. The question is, what do you want to do with this information?" I stared at the folder for a long moment, thinking about the past 8 years of my life. Thinking about all the times Marcus had held me and told me he loved me while maintaining an entire secret family. Thinking about how I had given up my career, my independence, my financial security because I trusted him completely. "I want him to lose everything," I said quietly. "I want him to feel exactly what he's made me feel: betrayed, humiliated, destroyed. I want him to understand what it's like when your entire world turns out to be built on lies." James nodded slowly. "Then we need to be strategic about this. Hitting him with criminal charges immediately gives him a chance to hide assets, to prepare defenses, to potentially flee. If you want maximum damage, we need to move in stages." "Tell me what to do," I said. Over the next week, James and I constructed a plan that would systematically dismantle Marcus's entire life. The key was maintaining complete secrecy. Marcus couldn't know I had discovered anything until it was too late for him to protect himself. Step 1, I needed to meet Sarah. Not as Marcus's wife, but as someone who could befriend her and plant seeds of suspicion without revealing too much. It was risky but necessary. I knew from James's investigation that Sarah took a yoga class every Tuesday and Thursday morning at a studio in Newton. So I joined the same class, positioning myself strategically so we'd end up next to each other during the session. Sarah was friendly in a cautious way, the type of person who was polite but didn't overshare with strangers. I played it carefully, making small talk after class about the instructor and the difficulty of certain poses. It took 3 weeks before she agreed to get coffee with me after class. Sitting across from her at that coffee shop was surreal. She talked about her life with an openness that made my chest ache: her husband who traveled too much for work, her kids who were growing up too fast, her frustration with managing everything alone while he was away. "But he's a good man," she said, stirring sugar into her latte. "He provides for us, he loves the kids. I just wish he was home more, you know." I wanted to scream at her that the man she was describing didn't exist, that every word out of her mouth proved how thoroughly he had deceived her. Instead, I nodded sympathetically and said, "I'm sure he does the best he can." Over the next month, I became Sarah's friend. We met for coffee regularly. She invited me to her house, the house Marcus had helped buy with money stolen from me, where I met Tyler and Emma, 2 innocent children who had no idea their father was a criminal and their entire family structure was built on fraud. The hardest part was seeing how much those kids loved Marcus. They showed me drawings they'd made for Daddy, talked about how he taught Tyler to ride a bike, described how he did funny voices when reading Emma bedtime stories. He was a present, engaged father to them in a way that made my childlessness feel even more cruel. During one of our coffee dates, I carefully started planting seeds of doubt. I mentioned that I'd been through a divorce years ago because my ex-husband had been hiding financial problems. I talked about warning signs I'd missed, unexplained absences, defensive behavior about money, reluctance to combine finances completely. I watched Sarah's expression shift as I spoke, recognition flickering across her face. "Marcus handles all our finances," she said slowly. "I've been asking to see our account statements, but he always says he'll get them to me and then forgets." "Probably nothing," I said casually. "But it never hurts to know where you stand financially. You could always pull your own credit report just to make sure everything looks right." The seed was planted. Now I just had to wait for it to grow. While I was befriending Sarah, James and my attorney, a shark named Patricia Drummond, were constructing the legal framework that would destroy Marcus. We filed for divorce quietly, without Marcus knowing, using a specialist who could serve him papers in a way that would cause maximum chaos. But before we did that, we needed to protect my assets. Patricia filed emergency motions freezing all joint accounts and preventing Marcus from accessing or transferring any marital property. She secured injunctions protecting my credit and preventing him from taking out any new loans or cards in my name. We also contacted the district attorney's office with evidence of Marcus's crimes. The DA, a woman named Angela Torres, reviewed everything James had gathered and confirmed that Marcus was looking at multiple felonies: bigamy, fraud, forgery, identity theft. "I can have him arrested tomorrow," Angela said during our meeting. "But if you want to maximize both criminal and civil penalties, timing matters." "I want him to have no warning," I told her. "I want him to wake up one morning and have his entire world collapse in the span of a few hours." Angela smiled grimly. "Then let's coordinate carefully." The trap was set. Now I just needed Marcus to walk into it. 3 months after I first saw Marcus at that hotel, everything came together on a Wednesday morning. Marcus had told me he was traveling to Philadelphia for a property inspection and would be gone for 2 days. In reality, I knew he was planning to stay home in Newton with Sarah and the kids. That Wednesday morning at 6:45 a.m., police officers knocked on Sarah's door with an arrest warrant for Marcus Reed. He answered the door in pajama pants, coffee mug in hand, completely unprepared for what was about to happen. I wasn't there for the arrest. I was at our brownstone in Brooklyn with Patricia and a moving company, removing my personal belongings before Marcus could return and try to prevent it. But James had arranged for everything to be recorded, and I watched the footage later. Sarah's face when she saw the police. Marcus's expression transforming from confusion to panic as they read him his rights. Tyler and Emma crying in the background, not understanding why men in uniforms were putting their father in handcuffs. At the exact same time, Patricia's process server was at the police station where Marcus was being taken, ready to hand him divorce papers the moment he was booked. And Angela Torres was preparing to present evidence of all his crimes to a judge who would set bail, so Marcus couldn't possibly meet it. But the real devastation came when Sarah started making phone calls, trying to understand what was happening to her husband. She called the one emergency contact Marcus had given her besides himself, his business partner who could help if anything went wrong. The number connected to our brownstone landline. I answered. "Hello," I said. "Hi, I'm looking for Michael Brennan." This is his business partner's number. Michael Brennan was the fake name Marcus had given Sarah as his emergency contact. "I'm sorry," I said carefully. "There's no one here by that name." "Who's calling?" "This is Sarah Reed. Sarah Mitchell Reed. There's been some kind of mistake. My husband Marcus was just arrested, and I'm trying to reach his business partner, but..." Her voice broke. "The police are saying things that don't make any sense. They're saying he's married to someone else? That he committed fraud." This was the moment I had been planning for 3 months. The moment when Sarah's world would shatter just like mine had. "Sarah," I said quietly. "My name is Catherine Reed. And I'm Marcus's wife. His legal wife. We've been married for 8 years. The silence on the other end of the line lasted for what felt like an eternity. Then I heard a sound that was half sob, half gasp, the sound of someone's reality breaking apart. "That's not possible," she whispered. "We're married. I have a marriage certificate. We have children together." "I know you do," I said, and despite everything, I felt genuine compassion for her. "Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Marcus has been living a double life for 7 years. You and I are both his victims. And if you want to protect yourself and your children, you need to contact an attorney immediately." The next 72 hours were chaos. Marcus was denied bail due to flight risk and the severity of his crimes. The news media picked up the story: real estate developer arrested for bigamy and fraud, and suddenly my private nightmare became public scandal. Sarah called me again that evening, after speaking with an attorney and beginning to understand the full scope of what Marcus had done. We met in person for the first time as 2 women who knew the truth, and it was one of the most painful conversations of my life. She cried as she described how Marcus had proposed, how he'd been there for Emma's birth, how she had believed every single lie he'd told her for 7 years. Her children were asking when Daddy was coming home, and she had no idea what to tell them. "He told me you were a business colleague," I said quietly. "When I saw you at that hotel, before I knew the truth, I thought maybe you were someone he worked with." "I never imagined that I was his other wife," Sarah finished bitterly. "That those were his children. That he'd built a completely separate life with me while being married to you. We sat in silence for a long moment, two women connected by the same predator, both trying to process the magnitude of the betrayal. What happens now? Sarah asked finally. Now we make sure he never does this to anyone else, I said. Marcus's trial began 6 months later. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of bigamy, fraud, forgery, and identity theft spanning nearly 8 years. They showed how he had maintained 2 families, how he had stolen from both of us, how he had created an elaborate web of lies that required constant management and manipulation. His defense attorney tried to paint him as someone who had made mistakes but wasn't a criminal, someone who had gotten in over his head and didn't know how to escape the situation he'd created. The jury didn't buy it. Sarah and I both testified. Sarah described her life with Marcus, how he had convinced her to give him access to her inheritance, how he had isolated her from friends and family who might have asked difficult questions. She talked about the impact on her children, who were now in therapy trying to understand why their father had lied to them about everything. When it was my turn, I described the moment I saw Marcus at that hotel, the months of silent investigation, the discovery that everything I had believed about my marriage was false. I presented evidence of the money he'd stolen, the credit he'd ruined, the future he'd destroyed because he wanted to fund his double life. Did you love your husband? The prosecutor asked me. I loved the man I thought he was, I said, looking directly at Marcus. But that man never existed. The person sitting at that defense table is a stranger who wore my husband's face and told me lies for 8 years. Marcus was convicted on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for at least 8. He would also be required to pay full restitution to both Sarah and myself, though the likelihood of ever seeing that money was minimal. As they led him out of the courtroom in handcuffs, Marcus looked at me one final time. There was no remorse in his expression, no apology, just cold anger that he'd been caught. 2 years have passed since that Wednesday morning when Marcus's world collapsed. The legal proceedings are finally complete, the divorce is finalized, and I'm beginning to build a life that's entirely my own. I returned to event planning, starting my own company that now employs 8 people and works with high-profile clients across New England. I moved out of the brownstone. I couldn't live there anymore, surrounded by memories that were all contaminated by lies, and bought a loft in downtown Manhattan that's completely mine. Sarah and I remain in contact, though our friendship is complicated by the circumstances that created it. She's focused on raising Tyler and Emma, trying to give them stability after their father destroyed their sense of security. The kids are resilient in the way children often are, adapting to their new reality even as they process the loss of the father they thought they knew. I still struggle with trust. Dating feels impossible when you've been so thoroughly deceived by someone you shared a bed with for 8 years. Every new person I meet is evaluated through a lens of suspicion that I can't turn off, every act of kindness examined for hidden motives. But I'm also stronger than I was before. I know now that I'm capable of surviving betrayal that should have destroyed me. I know I can conduct an investigation, build a legal case, and systematically dismantle someone's life when necessary. Those aren't skills I ever wanted to develop, but they're mine now, and they've made me someone who refuses to be a victim. I think about that moment in the hotel lobby sometimes, the moment I saw Marcus with his secret family and made the decision to become a ghost in my own marriage, silently gathering evidence instead of confronting him immediately. That decision changed everything. If I had confronted him that day, he would have lied. He would have crafted some explanation I might have believed, or at least wanted to believe. He would have had time to hide assets, to destroy evidence, to prepare for the legal battle ahead. Instead, I gave him enough rope to hang himself with, and he did it beautifully. 25:42, the final reflection. People ask me sometimes if I feel guilty about what happened to Marcus, about the fact that he's in prison and his children are growing up without their father. The answer is no. Marcus chose every single action that led to his incarceration. He chose to marry 2 women. He chose to have children with both of us. He chose to steal from us, to forge documents, to build his entire life on fraud and deception. I simply chose not to be his victim anymore. The woman I was before I saw Marcus at that hotel, naive, trusting, willing to believe the best of everyone, that woman is gone. She died in that lobby, killed by the truth of what her marriage really was. The woman who emerged from that death is harder, more cautious, less willing to extend trust without verification. But she's also free. Free from lies, from manipulation, from living in a reality that was never real to begin with. And that freedom, however painful it was to obtain, is worth more than anything Marcus ever gave me. I still drive past the Marriott sometimes when I'm in Boston. I park in the same spot where I had my breakdown that Tuesday afternoon, and I think about how one random decision, taking a shortcut through a hotel lobby, changed the trajectory of my entire life. If I hadn't taken that shortcut, I might still be living in the brownstone, still believing Marcus loved me, still funding his secret family without knowing they existed. Eventually, the truth would have emerged, lies that elaborate always collapse eventually. But by then, the damage would have been even worse, the theft even more extensive, the betrayal even deeper. So in a strange way, seeing Marcus that day was a gift. A terrible, devastating gift that destroyed my world, but also saved me from continuing to live in a lie. The woman standing in this hotel lobby now is someone Marcus never anticipated I could become. Someone strong enough to destroy him. Someone smart enough to do it systematically and completely. Someone who refuses to forgive or forget what was done to her. That woman is who I am now. Not broken, not damaged, simply changed in ways that can't be undone. Carrying knowledge that can't be forgotten. Living with clarity about human nature that's both burden and protection. And if this story taught me anything, it's that revenge isn't about emotion or impulse. It's about patience, strategy, and the willingness to become someone your enemy never saw coming. Marcus thought I was the perfect obedient wife. He was wrong. And that mistake cost him everything. If this story kept you engaged until the very end, smash that like button right now and let me know in the comments, what would you have done if you discovered your spouse's double life? Would you have confronted them immediately, or would you have done what I did and gathered evidence in silence? My favorite moment in this journey was watching Marcus's face when he realized I had orchestrated his entire downfall. What was yours? Drop your thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of betrayal, revenge, and women who refuse to be victims. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Remember, the best revenge is the kind they never see coming.